Welcome back to the Weeknight Mysteries Podcast. We're back again. Today I'm joined with Rain.
Today I'm joined by Rain. You're always joined by Rain.
Yeah, I'm always joined by Rain. Exactly. And
Hello, everyone.
And we're going to be talking about another true crime murder case. This is a bigger case. Last week we've done a few cases that were kind of smaller because there just wasn't enough information to, make them into a 60-minute episode. But today I think we have a interesting case on our hands. I think we should name it the Tube Sock Killer because we're going to be talking about multiple dead couples that have been found in Washington state throughout the mid-80s. And we suspect that some of those could definitely be connected. And that would mean that we have an unaccounted for serial killer roaming in Washington state in the 80s. So I'm here with Rain, and I think Rain is going to start off with one of the couple.
Of course, yeah. So let's go back to the morning of December 12th of 1985. Mike Riemer, he was 36 years old, and he had a 21-year-old girlfriend named Diana Robertson. And together, they have a little girl, a toddler, a 2-year-old daughter, Crystal. And this small family, it was a Christmas season, and they were trying to find a perfect Christmas tree for the Christmas Day as part of their family tradition. So they planned to go from their home of Tacoma to a foresty area in Pierce County.
Pierce County.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, I wanted to mention one detail, that the age gap between the couple is quite big, right?
I found it interesting as well.
Mike was 36.
And Diana was 21.
I don't know if you know this, but I've read somewhere that Mike knew Diana since she was 17.
Ooh.
But they had a 2-year-old daughter. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, Diana must have given birth at 19.
Well, that's illegal. No, not giving birth, like hitting up a minor.
I don't even know, because this was the 80s and this was Washington state, so I don't really know the legalities of...
it could be different back then.
Could be potentially, a little different. But yeah, please go on.
Of course. So the small family, they drove around 26 to 30 miles away from their home in Tacoma to a forest area in Pierce County to find the perfect Christmas tree. And Mike was also an animal trapper, so it's kind of dual purpose. They wanted the Christmas tree, and Mike wanted to check the traps that he set up in that forest area. So it makes sense so far. Nothing creepy, out of the ordinary.
Seems like a regular outing for the family.
Yeah.
Christmas spirit, everyone's just trying to, I guess, do their thing.
Mm-hmm. And the area where they wanted to go was known as a very scenic region, and there were a lot of campers and nature lovers. So once again, they're not going in a weird route. Seems typical so far.
Do you know if Mike or Diane, have they ever been there previously?
Yeah, because Mike was just about to check the traps that he set up. So he's been there, I believe, multiple times.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if he had ever taken his family there before.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
we don't have any information about this. All we know is that Mike probably frequented the area, and I don't know, I'm assuming he probably knew a little bit more of that area.
Yeah, I would say so. As a trapper.
Mm-hmm. Should be familiar with it. So yeah, they went there, but the darkness fell. And then Crystal, the 2-year-old daughter, was actually found in a Kmart store in Spanaway, or a Spanaway branch. You mentioned earlier today that it wasn't specifically in Spanaway, but somewhere a little bit outside.
Yeah, I think some articles mentioned that it was close to Spanaway. It was a Kmart grocery store or what was it called? The
Kmart.
The Kmart, and it was close to Spanaway.
It wasn't in that area.
How did she get there, do you think?
I have no idea, but so far, with all the information that we have, she was found alone and scared.
Their 2-year-old daughter is found alone in a Kmart. That's strange.
And which is actually 20 miles west of where they intended to go.
20 miles west from where they...
The foresty area.
Oh, okay.
So they intended to go to the foresty area, but hours later at nighttime, Crystal, the 2-year-old little baby, was found in a Kmart 20 miles west of the
scenic place where the family intended to go hunt out a Christmas tree.
So how did she get there?
I don't know, you tell me. Okay, I think you have some additional findings.
Yeah, definitely. We don't know how she ended up there. Nobody knew. Nobody ever found out. But the shoppers of Kmart back then, they were like, what's this little kid doing here? And they tried to spread the news, and then Crystal's grandmother recognized her, took her back, and then asked where is mom?
So just to quickly step in, I think what they did right, they put Crystal in a foster home for a few days, from my research, and then her grandmother somehow saw a news report.
Yeah, the media.
Yeah, in the media, and then was able to identify.
Yeah,
Crystal.
and I read in one of the articles that when Crystal saw her grandmother, she was like, Grandma, so immediate recognition.
And Crystal is 2 years old, so how much could she remember from that day?
True.
What did she say, though, when she was asked?
So when her grandma found her, the grandma asked, where's mom and dad, or where's mom? And she only replied with, Mommy is in the trees.
What does that mean?
Kind of creepy, honestly. That's all that she said. And the police tried to get some more information out of her. But since she was a 2-year-old, vocabulary is extremely limited. And that's all she said. Mommy is in the trees.
Pretty strange.
Yeah, really strange. What do you think so far?
I think so far that, well, we know that, unfortunately, it was a case of her parents. Well, now we know that they're no longer alive. I think the only question for me is, so far, is how exactly Crystal got there. My main question was one of her parents, either Diane, which we know it wasn't Diane for reasons that we're gonna get into in a bit, and we know that it could have been Mike. It could have been Mike,
who maybe dropped off Crystal in a Kmart in Spanaway.
Yeah. So my only question here is, did Mike drop off his daughter at the Kmart? And I'm also thinking, why so far away from the original location? 20 miles is a long drive.
Did they even go there?
Unless that was the closest public space.
Why not just drive her back to Tacoma? They must have a store in there somewhere.
Also, don't you think that a 2-year-old child who would have been just dropped off at the Kmart by her own dad, wouldn't that kid indicate, Daddy dropped me off, or something about Daddy?
Your daddy drove or something.
Daddy drove me here, but it was never reported. At least when I was looking at this case, I never seen any more other information other than she wasn't able to provide any useful information to law enforcement, and other than she said, the famous line, Mommy is in the trees. We don't really know what she actually said about Daddy. What about Mike?
No.
So my question is, would she mention something more about Mike if Mike was the one driving her? Or do you think that someone else was driving her. Now that I'm actually thinking through with this case, I'm actually even thinking that Mike could have driven her here. You know why? Because if it wasn't Mike who drove her to the Kmart store, wouldn't the 2-year-old Crystal, wouldn't she say, my parents are in the trees? Why did she?
Or mom and dad.
Mom and dad is in the trees. It's almost like at this point, she's telling everyone that something's wrong with the mom. But she's not necessarily telling anyone that something's wrong with the dad either. So maybe dad is still alive, but mom is already gone.
Or potentially, she did not see dad last. What I meant to say is that she saw her mom last. And that's still in her memory. Maybe Mike walked away from them, maybe to check out the traps.
Very good point. Actually, very good point. I didn't think about that. That's also a possibility.
And so the kid saw her mom last, and that's why she said, Mommy is in the trees.
I think also a very likely
Scenario, right?
Yeah, that's actually a good catch. I didn't even think about it. Yep. But tell me more about what actually happened next in this case.
Of course. So this case is slowly starting to get kind of creepy, very intriguing, but we're gonna make it even more so because over 2 months later, in February 18 of 1986, a motorist was driving along Washington State Route 7, just south of Elbe, Elbe, and he made a grim discovery. That person found Diana Robertson, Crystal's mom, body that was partially buried in snow.
I just want to ask, do you know if this location where Diana's body was found, was it actually the same location where the family originally intended to go Christmas shopping? Christmas tree hunting.
Actually, it was 31 miles away from the Kmart where they found Crystal, and about 35 miles away from where they initially wanted to go.
So it's not close to either of the two locations. It's a very random location. Did you say it was close to a road or something?
Yep, by the Washington State Route 7.
Okay.
Interesting. Very interesting.
I'm just trying to understand what's happening in this case because so far nothing adds up.
So the baby is like 31 miles away from the mom.
Yeah. And they're both are away from the place where they originally intended to go. So my question is, did they ever go to where they wanted to go that day?
I mean, so far I'm thinking they might have just went to Spanaway.
Didn't you mention also that the car was found close to Diane?
I'm just getting into that.
Oh, I'm
Nearby.
sorry.
No, it's all good.
Tell me.
Nearby, they found the pickup truck, the family's pickup truck. And inside the truck, literally inside, the police opened the car, and on the dashboard, like just resting on there, they found a note that says, I love you, Diana, written on a manila envelope, and it was Mike's handwriting.
Yeah, so a manila envelope is one of these like old school envelopes. I think they call it the manila envelope because they use some sort of ingredient from the Philippines to make that paper for those
I did not
folders.
know that.
No, I had to Google it because I had no idea what a manila envelope is. I was intrigued. On top of that, we have a note inside of a manila envelope. And manila envelope is like, if you could imagine like a movie from the 80s or the 70s or the 90s, and there's like, I don't know, like an FBI office, and they have a lot of files in these little like yellowish kind of folders.
Kind of brownish.
Kind of brownish, kind of yellow. So we have that type of folder, and inside of it we have a note that says what?
I love you. Not inside of it, on it.
On the envelope?
Yeah, it says, I love you, Diana.
Oh, so these words were said on the envelope.
Yeah.
But the envelope was empty. No?
I was trying to find any information about the contents of that envelopes. I did not find anything.
Neither do I. I was just thinking that it was just I love you, Diane. But then this kind of changes everything in my mind. You know why? Because I wasn't under the assumption before we started recording that what was inside of it was "I love you, Diane," which was such a strange thing to put inside of an envelope. But
Such a big one.
But now I think "I love you, Diane," and there's an item there. So this changes everything, in my opinion, because now I'm thinking about other possibilities.
No, honestly, I think it was empty. I really think it was empty. Maybe the contents were out of that envelope, the original one, but I believe that the police found it empty because we don't have any information.
Is it a red herring? Is it even connected to the case? Or is it just, oh, I'm not sure if you already mentioned this, but if my memory serves me correctly, then I recall there being a blood spot on the envelope.
Exactly.
A little bit of a blood splatter. So it almost seems like it somehow has to be connected.
Yeah.
In general, do you know what was the state of the vehicle when it was found? Did it have any like more clues that we could work with here, or is the envelope kind of the only thing that was ever mentioned by the news media in this
It was
case?
only the bloodstained note.
And that's pretty much it,
Yeah,
right?
that's pretty much it.
No fingerprints were used, nothing.
Did they even have fingerprint recognition?
Yes,
back
they
then?
did actually, because
Oh,
one
nice.
of the other cases that I'm gonna be bringing up in a little bit actually was solved due to people connecting fingerprints.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so they already had fingerprint techniques in '85, so we definitely can at least assume that there were no unaccounted for fingerprints found on the vehicle. That's what I'm thinking about.
Oh, that's crazy
All right.
so far. Yeah, so going back to the original story, there was a bloodstained note, and then nearby, Diana had been stabbed 17 times. Pretty crazy, but her body also had another eerie mark that connects her to some of the case that we're going to talk about later on. It was a tube sock, which was tied around her neck.
Do we know if the tube sock was one of the family members' tube sock? Was it Deanne's tube sock? It was just a tube sock, and I don't think it was ever mentioned who it belonged to.
Yeah, I don't think it belongs to them, or maybe it belonged to Mike, because for the longest time they did not have any sign of Mike.
Yeah, so maybe it was one of Mike's tube socks. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike's full body remains have never been located.
No, 25 years after that incident, they only found Mike's skull.
But they never found the rest of his body or
No.
clothes that he was wearing. But I'm also thinking, would you be wearing tube socks in December in Washington? I mean, I have no idea. You might be wearing them, but I always imagine tube socks, you usually wear them with like shorts. I don't really... If you would Google tube socks, I think even if in Google Images, the first, images you will see is people like wearing shorts, like they want to show off their tube socks. That's the whole idea of a tube sock, is if you want to show it off. So I'm thinking, isn't December in Washington a little bit too cold to show off tube socks? Who
Maybe
would be
that's the
wearing?
reason you're gonna wear tube socks, because it's cold.
That also could be a possibility. I wonder if it was a male's tube socks or females.
No, never mentioned.
Just tube socks. Just a tube sock, and I guess that's all we have right now.
Yep.
Also, Diane was stabbed 17 times, you say.
17 times, yep.
Do we know in which part of her body?
Nope, we don't have any other information other than she's been stabbed, and I'm assuming somewhere around the chest area or
That
all over.
was my first assumption also, that she may have been stabbed like in the torso area.
Yeah, and whoever did it, it seemed like it's out of rage.
17 times of stabbing, it seems like it's a very rageful thing. Did he ever found the murder weapon in this case?
No,
Do you have any idea?
no idea.
But it's kind of strange because now you have Mike, who is missing. There's a tube sock who we don't know whom it belonged to. And we also have a woman laying dead with 17 stab wounds, and presumably we don't know where the murder weapon is.
Yeah.
I think it's strange that we have items that are also missing. Like the murder weapon is missing from the scene, and Mike is also missing.
Definitely.
It could almost seem like Mike was responsible, potentially, but at the same time, it could mean that Mike wasn't responsible. It's just that the person who murdered both of them, potentially. Maybe
Maybe-
they hid a knife later.
Maybe Mike wasn't around when the murderer came in.
Exactly, because Mike was
But-
busy that day. He
Sorry.
had to check traps and do all kinds of stuff.
But we also have to take note that little Crystal was spared. She was driven to a store where people could see her and take her in.
I think that's normal though, because I think it's either a person who is, well, obviously, I think it could be anyone, honestly, but I think it must have been a person who wasn't about to kill a child.
Yeah, but then again, why drive her into a place where people could see you? So you could have easily, he or whoever the killer might have been, could have easily left Crystal there. But
Maybe Crystal would have died on her own.
definitely no. So the killer considered that.
Yeah, I think the killer knew that even leaving the 2-year-old,
That's it.
that's it for that 2-year-old, potentially, unless it's like a lucky miracle. But it's pretty likely that she would have died.
Yeah, so the killer drove her to where...
To safety.
Yeah, to safety, basically.
Yeah, the killer drove her to safety,
So,
essentially.
so whoever the killer was, he or she spared the innocent.
Okay, so we have basically concluded Mike Riemer and Diana Roberts' case, and we don't really know what actually happened there. But now we have additionally 3 other couples that, had been the victims of murder in that same sort of like general location at around the same time. So I'm going to be bringing some attention to a few other cases. I want to talk about Steven Harkins and the Ruth Cooper case first, because this case had the biggest similarities to the case that we just spoke about. So it was a Saturday on August 10th, back in 1985. So we're...
Was it the same year that Diane and...
Yes.
Oh, okay.
It was the same exact year. It was just a few months prior. Because now we're moving to the summer in Washington. And we have a 27-year-old man, Steven Harkins, who was planning a weekend camping trip with his 42-year-old girlfriend. Once again, a bit of a time difference, but not that...
The age gap is crazy.
There was some age gap, I guess. And Ruth Cooper, who was 42 years old, she also was a mother of 5 children, which makes this case extra terrible.
Wait, so they had children, or was it just Ruth's children?
I believe it was just Ruth's children. I'm not really sure if it's their children. The pair had been together for about 3 years, and they were living in Tacoma, Washington, with a dog, who was also accompanying them on the trip. The couple headed out towards a somewhat remote Tule Lake in the same Pierce County as you've been talking about. What happened after that is not really clear. The only thing that we know right now with any certainty is that neither Steven nor Ruth turned up for their teaching jobs on Monday because they went on the weekend, they didn't come back home. At which point their concerned families reported them missing to the authorities. Just a few days later, on that same week, on Wednesday, August 14th, some hikers stumbled across Steven's body, still lying in a sleeping tent, at the campsite. He had been shot in the head, presumably while he slept. The body of the couple's dog was also found, not far away. The animal had likewise been shot to death. A month later, in October on October 26th, the skull of Ruth was discovered near Harts Lake, which is another lake close by, about a mile and a half from where Steven's remains have been found back in August. But it's strange because that would mean that whomever killed Ruth and Steven, I'm under the assumption that maybe Steven was murdered while he slept, while Ruth was taken hostage. I am under the assumption that this is how this particular case played out.
Yeah, honestly, it seemed like it actually happened that way.
Exactly. The most damning part here, and the part that connects the case that I'm talking about to the case that you've mentioned earlier, is that a tube sock had also been tied around Ruth's neck. 2 days later, the rest of her body and her purse was found about 50 feet away from the skull.
50 feet away from the skull?
Which is 15 meters.
Oh, okay.
Close by. Though the sock found around the neck would seem to suggest strangulation, the cause of death was actually determined to be gunshot wound to the abdomen. So it almost seems like the tube sock was tied around her neck, not to murder Ruth, but to torture
Kind of
Ruth.
like an accessory. Murder accessory.
I would think to torture Ruth in some sort of a strangulatory way. And
so sorry.
of
Really
course,
quickly.
no, yeah.
Now I have this picture in my head that Steve might have actually been shot while he was sleeping, and that Ruth woke up, tried to run away, and then
she got caught.
She got shot
Or like
on her tummy.
No, I think I'm under the assumption that she was, at gunpoint taken hostage and moved to the other lake location where she was murdered.
Oh, because I'm assuming that she ran and somehow.
No, I think she, as I understand, because it was far away, you can't just like drag around the body like that. I think she must have walked there by herself. She was under the gunpoint, and she was, in my opinion, taken to that other lake location a mile and a half away. It's a pretty big long walk. It's not like around the corner. Initially, authorities attempted to connect the Harkins Cooper murder with a very similar double homicide that had occurred earlier that year. So I'm not going to be talking about Diane and Mike's case, not the one that you've talked about. I'm actually going to be talking about Edward Smith and his fiancée, Kimberly Lawine, that happened earlier in the year on March of 1985. So we're moving even more back a few months. We're still staying in 85, but this is sort of the first part of 85. The case that you've mentioned happened at the later part.
The latest one.
Exactly. So the couple also went on a weekend getaway, seemingly very coincidentally the same routine, but they were going to Grant County. And we know that sometime later, the body of Edward Smith was found in a gravel pit near a Wanapum Dam, which is actually quite a bit further away from where the bodies of Ruth and Steven were found. I even have a image in our notes of a Google map, like a Google Map satellite view. It's a bit farther away, so it's not like it's happening in the same place, but it's close by. The man's hands were tied behind his back, and his throat had been slit. 2 weeks later, the couple's car was recovered 10 miles away from Edward's remains were found. But Kimberly Lawine's body wasn't discovered until August, lying in some sagebrush 2 miles away from Edward. So the way this thing plays out in my head is that I am assuming that the culprit must have driven their car at some point. If that makes sense, because Kimberly's body was found further away, and Kimberly's body was 2 miles away.
So, do you think there's a possibility that whoever the killer was held her at gunpoint as well?
Yeah, so if we would quickly remember the details about Edward Smith. Edward, he had his hands tied behind his back and his throat had been slit. So, in my opinion, he was most likely under gunpoint, tied up,
Definitely.
and then was murdered. And 2 weeks later, they found Kimberly's body, and she was 2 miles away. Now, a fingerprint was salvaged from the vehicle, and in 1989, 4 years later, this would lead to the capture of a truck driver named Billy Ray Ballard Jr., who had been arrested for kidnapping, sexually assaulting, and
SA?
and torturing 2 women in Wyoming. And now they took his fingerprints and they connected him to the same fingerprints that were left on Edward's and Kimberly's vehicle. Ballard eventually confessed to killing Edward Smith and Kimberly Levine. And though the crime was similar to the earlier crime that I was talking about Steven and Ruth, authorities were never able to connect him to Ruth and Steven.
The second couple.
Yes, the second
Yeah.
couple. However, and we don't know, but just because it happened in somewhat of a close proximity where one of the victims clearly indicated signs of restraint, and it's exactly the same as Stephen and Ruth case, because in a way that the culprit first eliminates the man.
Wait. Sorry, just
Yeah.
going back to how Kimberly's body was found. Was there a tube sock tied around her?
No, there was no tube sock.
Why do I have like a strange? Just came into my mind. Why? I have a strange feeling that maybe whoever tied up the tube sock around Ruth was like the right tube sock, and then the left one for Diana.
I don't think so, because it was like very far. The time span is different.
Oh, okay.
So you
A couple of months, no?
a few months, yeah.
Yeah. Probably kept the tube sock.
I don't know.
Sorry, just
No, I
out of
haven't.
context.
I have no idea how to add to that one. It could be, but I mean, why not?
We'll
right?
never know because we don't have that information.
I mean, someone has the information, because I believe that the law enforcement definitely know if the tube socks are like from the same pair. Because if they are from the same pair, then obviously this is a
One person.
yeah.
And somehow Kimberly and the partners are not connected.
Yeah, somehow they just did not connect it. Okay, let's go back in time. Now let's go back in time to maybe
Talk about Diana?
talk about Diana and Mike one more time. So we already talked about Diana and Mike's case, and Crystal, the 2-year-old that was found. And now the one thing I want to immediately mention is the way the tube sock was tied. The coroner immediately realized it from Diane's skull, and he even made like a whistling noise, according to law enforcement, that, oh, I know, I've seen this before. So he recognized the way the knot was tied on
was the
Diana's
same.
skull. It was the same exact knot as on Ruth's skull.
Oh my gosh.
So we know that it's the same exact knot.
At least we know it's so the same person who committed the crime.
I don't think it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the same person, but I think it's a very likely
Yeah, but
outcome.
how come 2 different people, if it was 2 different killers, managed to tie the same knot in 2 different killings?
And use a tube sock. Yeah, it
Too
looks
much of a coincidence.
it's definitely looking like it's too much of a coincidence in this
Definitely one person,
in this scenario.
one culprit.
Exactly, and then there was one similar case that happened a little bit later. The last one that I kind of want to briefly mention.
Oh wait, so there weren't just 3 couples.
There's a fourth couple that we could potentially connect, but it's maybe the least connectable. But I think it's worth talking about. Why I say it's least connectable is because it happened around 100 miles away from the general location, and it happened in 87. So we have to put a little bit of time and a little bit of distance into this case if we're going to try to figure out what happened there. 20-year-old Jay Cook and his 18-year-old girlfriend Tanya Van Culleyborg had traveled down from Canada on an errand for Tanya's father's business. Days later, Tanya's bound body was found in a ditch near Alger. She had been assayed and shot in the head. Jay was eventually found, beaten with rocks, and strangled about 60 miles from where Tanya's remains were discovered. We don't know if a tube sock knot was used. In 2018, way into the future, actually just, a few years
Just
ago.
recently, yeah.
Yeah. A truck driver named William Earl Talbot II was found guilty of the murders after a genealogical DNA match was made. He is currently serving 2 life sentences at Washington State Penitentiary, and it is not known whether he had any connection to the tube sock killings.
I don't think it was him,
How come?
tube sock killer.
Yeah.
Because wouldn't DNA be used? Like DNA found from way back then to...
Actually, very good point.
Right?
That means that he never really connected William's DNA to any of the other murders. Well, we know that Edward and Kimberly, we know that they have been murdered
By another truck driver.
by a man named Billy Ray Ballard. A couple that I was talking about, Jay Cook and Tanya Van Culleyborg, they had been murdered by a different man. So we know that all of them can't connect. We're just trying to figure out if one of either William or Billy could be the tube sock killer.
Oh.
What do you think? Any chance of that happening?
No, I don't think so. Unless they didn't get any DNAs from those cases, killings. Because wouldn't those anyone could be connected to it through DNA? I don't know.
Well, when you think about it, we have no idea how Mike died, but we know how Diana died.
Oh yeah, we also need to bring this up now.
Diana died under
Multiple
stabbing, but also her remains were found, I think,
close to the car.
But I think it was already skeletal.
Diana.
I'm under the assumption it's already skeletal. I assume it's skeletal. So can you take DNA off of a dead person who has
The car.
The car. You don't need to step into the car potentially. You can
No,
just...
like who? There was a blood-stained note.
That could be a red herring. I think they tried to match it for blood, and they were only able to establish that it was human blood, but they never established whose blood it was.
No, what I meant to say is that whoever the killer was, if
Yeah.
he set it up,
Yeah.
he would have opened the door. He would have touched the car. Or she.
I don't think not necessarily, right? Why would they have to go inside of the car? It's not a must.
If they want it to be staged.
I don't think it's not a must for them to enter the car at that point, in my opinion.
Yeah, but if they want it staged, they would have tried to set it up from that note.
I think that note doesn't really play that much of a role, in my opinion.
Potentially, it could.
We have this situation right now. We have Billy Ray Ballard, the first man who had being proven as a murderer, has been ruled out as a suspect by law enforcement in any of the tube saw killings. According to the information we found online, it was still possible that he could have committed the murders. Billy Ray Ballard could have been the tube saw killer. Let's remember that he was the man who murdered Edward and Kimberly.
Oh, yeah.
Remember Edward and Kimberly? So we know that the man who killed Edward and Kimberly, Billy Ray Ballard, he could be. I have not found online any reason why he could not be. It's not likely, maybe that's what we're saying. But is he completely? Is it impossible for him to have been the main killer? No, it's still possible.
It is, but it's just surprising how they didn't match any of his DNA somewhere.
Yeah. I think we have to talk about the main
Guy.
not the main guy, but I would say the main
Topic.
no, the elephant in the room, if you will.
Mike. Is it Mike?
Mike.
Yeah. So, going back to the first case that we talked about today, Mike's body was never been found.
His skull was found.
Yeah, his body. But his skull was found 25 years after the murder,
Yep.
the incident. So I'm assuming not assuming, at this point Crystal was all grown up and they found Mike's skull, but the skull was so old and potentially deteriorated that they were unable to confirm if he died of a gunshot.
I think they determined that it wasn't a gunshot.
Wait, they did?
I think they were able to say that he didn't. My research, according to the things I found, they said that he didn't sustain a gunshot wound
In the head.
but the rest of his
Oh.
body has never been found.
Okay, sorry for the false information.
No, it's okay, because we don't really know the cause of death for Mike. We just know he hasn't been shot in the head. That's all we know.
What if he has been shot in the body?
Could
We'll
be.
never know.
We might know if his remains are discovered.
True. But the elephant in the room, could Mike potentially be the tube saw killer?
Yeah, and I think obviously I don't want to, talk about a dead man who can't defend his
Own self?
own self, because Mike could very likely be a victim of a terrible murder that happened.
It's just unfortunate that his remains, like his full remains have never been found.
We don't have that information right now, so I don't want to say anything more than that. But I guess the question here is that we have to bring this question. It was Mike, the tube saw killer. We have to bring this question, because when you think about it, Ruth and Steven, they were killed in the same location where Mike was known to trap at. We know that Diane and Ruth had the same tube sock.
Yeah. So, and with the same knot.
With the
Most
same
likely
knot.
made by the same person.
Not the same tube sock, of course, but the same way. That would indicate, if this scenario was the case, and we're just speculating, none of this is potentially true, Mike would have, for one reason or another, snuck into the campsite during nighttime when Steven was sleeping, shot him in the head, and abducted Ruth, and dragged Ruth to the other lake.
Don't forget the dog.
Shot the dog as well.
So, because I find it interesting, if the dog was spared,
Yeah.
and if they found the skeletal remains of the dog, I would have think that whoever the killer might be, he or she spared the innocent,
Yeah.
the kid and the dog. But no, in this case, the dog was also killed.
Maybe the dog was harder to control than the kid.
Honestly, the kid might remember something. The dog can't speak.
I'm pretty sure as a 2-year-old, you wouldn't. I think it's pretty common that a 2-year-old wouldn't remember that much.
No. But what I meant to say is
And,
that
and even if they point at you, you could always claim that a 2-year-old's memory is crazy.
no. But what I meant to say is that between a dog and a 2-year-old, the risk is higher with the 2-year-old.
No. The risk is way higher with a big dog. What
How
are you
come?
talking about? A big dog can bite you and kill you.
Like, what kind of dog are you talking about?
I don't know, but I'm under the assumption it was like a bigger dog.
I'm assuming it's like a small dog.
No. I
Damn.
think it's probably a big dog. One way or another, it's making noise. It's like running around. It might lead to, you know what I mean? A dog is a way bigger threat for this culprit than a 2-year-old. Think about it. It's way different. So
Okay.
I wouldn't look too much into that. It's just my opinion. I hope it made some sense.
Yeah, no, because I'm assuming that it's like a friendly-ish dog because they took the dog with them on a campsite. It's a public space. So I'm
Not
assuming
sure
it
how
could
public.
be
Somewhat
a
public.
friendly-ish dog.
I guess we don't know. We don't know this information. And then what else would connect Mike? Well, Mike had a domestic violence charge for him in October against Diane.
I think we should say DV.
Domestic what? DV. Okay, domestic V. He was charged with domestic V against Diane in October, just 1 month or like some time prior to them both dying.
But apparently Diana forgave him
Yeah,
and they got back together.
but family members from Diane's side claimed that Mike was
Abusive.
towards Diane.
Well, that's a huge red flag.
That's a very big red flag on top of that. And then obviously I would see how Mike would not want to kill his own daughter and would bring her to a safe place and then would probably go back to a close by location and, you know, end himself.
That could. But
He wouldn't end himself by shooting in the head, though. That is one thing that we know.
I'm very interested how only a skull was found.
Animals.
Oh, wait.
It's been so
Could
long
not
ago.
be a gun.
Pills.
No. Stabbing.
Himself.
If he did it, probably stabbed Diana first and then proceeded in doing it to himself.
Yeah, potentially.
Because the knife has never been found.
Yeah, and then also working from this logic, who would have hatred towards Diane for one reason or another to the point that they would stab them 17 times? It has to be someone who knows Diane.
Or a psycho, honestly.
Or a psycho, but I would say,
Because Ruth was killed with the same tube sock manner.
yeah, but she was shot.
Yeah.
She was
Oh.
shot in the abdomen. She wasn't stabbed 17 times.
Okay. Could you remind me if there was any other killings after Diane's?
After Diane's, we have
The teenagers, right?
teenagers 2 years later. Yeah.
But it sounds really far-fetched.
Not necessarily far-fetched, just some time ago, and then 100 kilometers away. 100
No, but
miles
there's
away.
no more tube sock.
No, there wasn't any more similar, very similar
Yeah.
connecting factors.
So it could potentially be Mike.
It could be Mike. It could definitely be Mike. But I don't want to say it's Mike.
Yeah,
Because
definitely
if
not.
he's innocent, then I would feel like the worst person of all time, claiming that an innocent man is the killer. You know, I definitely don't want to
It
say
could
that.
be someone else that we don't know who
Yeah.
got I don't know, who ran away with it.
Yeah, and I would just have to think about who is actually the tube saw killer. That is the big question
The
here.
biggest mystery.
Yeah, and I hope some of the people that listen to this podcast today, hopefully you guys have some thoughts about who could the tube saw killer be. Do you think it's Mike? Do you think it's someone else? Please leave a comment in the YouTube channel. We always read them, and we are always very happy to see you guys engaging. And thank you for all of the new subscribers that had subscribed recently and joined the audience and
Audience.
the audience. And we will talk to you soon.
See you very soon, audience.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.